I never thought I would hear my own husband say these exact words to me. The house is sold. You need to be out by the end of the month. You were never on the deed, so legally you have no right to be here. This is my property, and I can do whatever I want with it. Those words hit me like a freight train. I stood there in our living room, the same living room where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, and I could not process what was happening. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Mark, the man I had trusted completely, the man I had built a life with, was throwing me out like garbage. But what Mark did not know was that his own brother, David, would become the person who helped me bring him down. David saw everything. He heard everything. And when the time came, he stood up in court and told the truth that destroyed Mark's lies completely. My name is Sarah, and for 8 years, I thought I was living a good life. Mark and I met at a friend's barbecue. He seemed charming and successful. He worked in real estate, which I thought was impressive. He always talked about investments and properties. I was a teacher, making a decent living, but nothing fancy. When we decided to move in together, Mark suggested we buy a house. He said he would handle all the paperwork because he knew the real estate world inside and out. I trusted him. Why would I not? He was my partner. He told me that putting the house in his name alone would make the mortgage process easier because of his business connections. He promised me we were building our future together. I believed every single word. Every month, without fail, I transferred my share of the mortgage payment to Mark. It was not a small amount. I paid half of everything: the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, all of it. I have bank statements going back years proving every single payment. I thought I was investing in our shared home. I thought I was securing our future. Mark never corrected me. He never told me I was just a tenant with no legal rights. He let me believe I was a co-owner. He let me paint the walls. He let me choose furniture. He let me plant flowers in the garden. He made me feel like it was our home, not just his. David was someone I saw at family gatherings. He was Mark's younger brother by 3 years. He worked as an accountant and always seemed quiet and thoughtful. We were not close, but he was always polite to me. He would ask how my teaching was going and seemed genuinely interested. I never thought much about him beyond being my brother-in-law. He had his own life, his own apartment across town. Mark and David were not particularly close either. They saw each other at holidays and occasional family dinners. But that was about it. I had no idea that David would become so important to my story. The day everything fell apart started like any normal Tuesday. I came home from school, tired from dealing with rowdy 6th graders all day. I walked into the house and found Mark sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up at me with this cold expression I had never seen before. There was no warmth in his eyes, no recognition of the years we had spent together. He just looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was a problem he needed to solve. My stomach dropped before he even said a word. I knew something terrible was about to happen. That was when he said it. When he told me the house was sold and I had to leave. When he reminded me that I was never on the deed. When he made it clear that legally, I had no claim to anything. I just stood there, frozen. My brain could not catch up to what my ears were hearing. I asked him if this was some kind of joke. He said no. I asked him what about all the money I had paid. He shrugged and said, I had been living there, so I had gotten my value. Living there, like I was renting a room from a stranger, like 8 years meant nothing. I tried to talk to him. I tried to understand why he was doing this. He refused to give me real answers. He just kept saying it was his decision and his right. I asked where I was supposed to go. He said that was not his problem. I felt my legs go weak. I sat down on the floor right there in the kitchen, because I could not stand anymore. Mark just looked at me, picked up his papers, and walked out of the room. That night, he slept in the guest room. I did not sleep at all. I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my entire life had just collapsed in a matter of minutes. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I could not face a classroom full of kids when my whole world was falling apart. I started making phone calls. First, I called my parents. They were horrified. They could not believe Mark would do something like this. My dad wanted to come over and confront him, but I told him not to. I needed to think clearly. I needed legal help, not an emotional confrontation. So I called a lawyer. I found someone who specialized in property disputes and family law. Her name was Jennifer, and she agreed to see me that same afternoon. Sitting in Jennifer's office, I laid out everything. I showed her my bank statements proving years of mortgage payments. I showed her text messages where Mark and I discussed home improvements and future plans. I told her about the verbal agreements we had. Jennifer listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she looked at me with sympathy, but also with honesty. She explained that without my name on the deed or a formal co-ownership agreement, my legal position was weak. She said Mark had technically not done anything illegal by selling a house that was solely in his name. The mortgage payments I made could be argued as rent or contributions to household expenses. My heart sank even further. I felt utterly helpless, but Jennifer did not give up. She said there might be other angles to explore. She asked detailed questions about how Mark had handled the situation. She asked if there was any evidence of intentional fraud or misrepresentation. She asked if he had made specific promises about ownership that could be proven. She asked if there were any witnesses to conversations where Mark had acknowledged my ownership stake. That last question stuck with me. Witnesses? Who would have witnessed anything? We lived alone. Most of our serious conversations happened in private. I told Jennifer I would think about it and try to remember anything that might help. Over the next few days, Mark avoided me completely. He left early in the morning and came home late at night. When we did cross paths, he acted like I was invisible. The coldness was unbearable. This was not the man I thought I knew. I started to see him differently. I started remembering things I had ignored or excused over the years. Like how he always insisted on keeping our finances separate. How he never wanted to add me to any official documents. How he made all major decisions without really consulting me. I had thought he was just independent and capable. Now I realized he had been protecting his assets and keeping me in a powerless position all along. I also remembered times when Mark had been irresponsible with money. There was a period 2 years ago when he made some bad investments and lost a significant amount. I had helped him cover some expenses during that time. He had thanked me and said we were a team. But now I understood. I was a team when it benefited him. When he needed my money, I was a partner. When it came to ownership and legal rights, I was nobody. The anger started to mix with my sadness. I was not just heartbroken, I was furious. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I printed out bank statements, I saved emails, I took screenshots of text messages. I made a timeline of every conversation I could remember about the house. Jennifer had told me to document everything, so that is what I did. I worked on it every evening after work, building my case piece by piece. It felt like the only thing I could control in a situation where I had lost control of everything else. About 2 weeks after Mark dropped the bomb, I got an unexpected phone call. It was David, Mark's brother. I was surprised because David and I never really talked on the phone. He asked if we could meet for coffee. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. I was curious and honestly desperate for any kind of support, so I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near my school the next afternoon. David looked uncomfortable when I sat down across from him. He fidgeted with his coffee cup and avoided eye contact at first. Then, He took a deep breath and started talking. He told me that Mark had been bragging. David had gone over to Mark's new apartment, the place Mark had moved to after kicking me out, and Mark had been in a great mood. He told David about selling the house for a huge profit. He laughed about how he had managed to get me to pay half the mortgage for years without giving me any legal claim. He called me foolish. He said I was too trusting and that it was my own fault for not protecting myself. Hearing this from David made me feel sick, but David was not done. He said he had been disgusted by what Mark said. He told me he had argued with Mark, telling him what he did was wrong. Mark just laughed it off and said, business was business. David said he barely slept that night. He kept thinking about how cruel and calculated Mark had been. He said he could not stay silent. He wanted to help me if there was any way he could. I was stunned. Here was Mark's own brother, offering to stand with me against him. I asked David why he would risk his relationship with his brother for me. David said it was not about me specifically. It was about what was right. He said he had always known Mark could be selfish, but this was a new level. He said he did not want to be the kind of person who looked the other way when someone was being hurt. His words brought tears to my eyes. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe I was not completely alone. I immediately told Jennifer about David. She was very interested. She asked if David would be willing to testify about what Mark had said. David agreed without hesitation. Jennifer explained that David's testimony could be crucial. It could help establish that Mark had intentionally deceived me and had been unjustly enriched by my payments. It could show a pattern of manipulation and fraud. This changed everything. My case went from weak to potentially strong. Jennifer and I started building a more aggressive legal strategy. She filed a lawsuit against Mark for fraud, unjust enrichment, and breach of an implied contract. She argued that even though my name was not on the deed, Mark had created a reasonable expectation of shared ownership through his words and actions. She argued that he had accepted my money under false pretenses, and she made it clear that we had a witness who could testify to Mark's own admissions of intentional deception. Mark was served with the lawsuit at his new apartment. According to David, who heard about it later, Mark was enraged. He could not believe I was actually fighting back. He had expected me to just slink away quietly. He definitely did not expect his own brother to be involved. Mark called David and screamed at him over the phone. He accused David of betrayal and disloyalty. David told him that loyalty did not mean supporting someone who was doing something wrong. Mark hung up on him. They did not speak again for months. The legal process was slow and stressful. There were motions and counter-motions. Mark hired his own lawyer, a slick guy who tried to paint me as a bitter ex-partner making false claims. They argued that I had simply been living in Mark's house and contributing to expenses, which was normal. They said there was no fraud because Mark had never put anything in writing promising me ownership. They tried to make me look foolish and vindictive. But Jennifer was prepared. She presented all my evidence, the bank statements showing years of consistent payments that matched exactly half of the mortgage, the text messages where Mark and I discussed our home and our future together using language that implied shared ownership, the emails about renovations where Mark asked for my input and approval, and most importantly, she had David. The deposition process was intense. Both sides had to give statements under oath before the trial. When it was my turn, Mark's lawyer tried to rattle me. He asked aggressive questions, trying to make me admit that I had known the house was only in Mark's name. I stayed calm and told the truth. I said yes. I knew the house was in his name, but that Mark had assured me it was a technicality and that we were building our future together. I said I had trusted my partner, and that trust had been weaponized against me. When it was Mark's turn, he was cocky. He admitted the house had only been in his name. He admitted I had made payments, but he characterized those payments as my contribution to living expenses. He denied ever promising me ownership. He said I had misunderstood the situation. He was smooth and confident. I could see he thought he was going to win. Then came David's deposition. Mark's lawyer did not seem too worried about him at first. After all, what could a brother really say that would matter? But David was clear and detailed. He described the specific conversation at Mark's apartment. He quoted Mark's exact words about how he had gotten me to pay half the mortgage without giving me any legal claim. He described Mark's tone, his laughter, his arrogance. He explained how Mark had explicitly called me foolish and said it was my fault for trusting him. The lawyer tried to suggest David was lying or exaggerating. David did not budge. He said he would swear to it in court. After the depositions, there was a settlement conference. This is where both sides meet with a mediator to see if the case can be resolved without going to trial. Mark's lawyer suddenly seemed less confident. Jennifer pushed hard. She made it clear that we were ready to go to trial and that David's testimony would be damning. She said a jury would not look kindly on a man who manipulated his partner for years and then bragged about it. Mark's lawyer talked to Mark privately for a long time. They came back with an offer. Mark would pay me a portion of the profit from the house sale. It was not half, but it was substantial. It would cover all the mortgage payments I had made plus some additional compensation. Jennifer looked at me and said it was a reasonable offer and that going to trial was always a risk. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to fight to the very end. I wanted to see Mark squirm in front of a jury. But another part of me was exhausted. I wanted this to be over. I wanted to move on with my life. I was about to agree to the settlement when something happened that changed my mind. During a break, I overheard Mark talking to his lawyer in the hallway. I had gone to the restroom and was walking back when I heard his voice. He was saying that he was only offering the settlement because his lawyer advised it, but that he still thought I deserved nothing. He said, once this was over, he would make sure everyone knew I was a gold digger who had tried to steal his property. He laughed and said, I would not get a cent more than the bare minimum he was forced to give. That was it. Hearing him talk about me like that, hearing him plan to trash my reputation even after paying me off, I knew I could not settle. I walked back into the conference room and told Jennifer I wanted to go to trial. She looked surprised, but nodded. She told the mediator we were rejecting the offer. Mark's lawyer looked frustrated. Mark looked angry, but I did not care. I was done being pushed around. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. Those months were some of the hardest of my life. I'd moved in with my parents temporarily because I could not afford my own place after losing the house. I was still teaching, but it was hard to focus. My students could tell something was wrong. I tried to keep it together, but some days were harder than others. My friends and family were supportive, but I felt like a burden. I felt like my life had been put on hold while I waited for a court to decide my fate. Jennifer prepared me thoroughly for trial. We went over my testimony again and again. She taught me how to stay calm under cross-examination. She explained how the trial would proceed and what to expect. She also prepared David, who was nervous but determined. He said he had come this far, and he was not backing out now. The trial finally began on a cold Monday morning in November. The courthouse was intimidating. I sat at a table next to Jennifer, and Mark sat at a table across the aisle with his lawyer. We did not look at each other. The jury was selected, 12 people who would decide my fate. They looked like ordinary people, which I guess they were. I tried to read their faces, but they were neutral. Jennifer said that was normal. The opening statements laid out each side's case. Jennifer spoke clearly and passionately. She told my story. She explained how I had trusted Mark, how I had paid half of everything for years, how he had made me believe we were building a life together, and how he had then pulled the rug out from under me. She said the evidence would show a pattern of intentional deception, and that Mark had been unjustly enriched at my expense. She told the jury that Mark's own brother would testify to Mark's admissions. Mark's lawyer gave a different version. He said this was a case of a relationship gone bad and a woman who regretted not protecting herself legally. He said Mark had done nothing illegal. He said the house was always in Mark's name and that I had simply contributed to household expenses like any couple living together. He said I was trying to use the court system to get money I was not entitled to. Then the evidence phase began. Jennifer called me to the stand first. I was terrified, but I tried to remember everything she had taught me. I told my story. I explained how Mark and I met, how we decided to buy a house, how he assured me it was our home, and how I had paid half of everything. I showed the jury my bank statements. I read text messages out loud where Mark and I talked about our house and our future. I described the day he told me the house was sold, and I had to leave. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but my voice shook when I talked about how betrayed I felt. Mark's lawyer cross-examined me. He was aggressive, just like in the deposition. He tried to make me admit that I had never asked to be put on the deed. I explained that Mark had told me it was unnecessary and that I trusted him. He tried to suggest I was lying about what Mark had said. I stayed firm. I said I was telling the truth and that I had no reason to lie. The cross-examination felt like it went on forever, but Jennifer had prepared me well. I did not fall apart. Jennifer called other witnesses too. She called my parents, who testified about conversations they had heard between Mark and me about the house. She called a friend who remembered Mark referring to it as our house at a dinner party. She presented emails and documents. She built a strong case that I had a reasonable belief that I was a co-owner. Then it was time for David. The courtroom felt different when he walked in. Mark stared at him with pure hatred. David did not look at Mark. He was sworn in and sat down in the witness chair. Jennifer asked him to describe his relationship with Mark. He said they were brothers, but not particularly close. She asked him if he had a conversation with Mark about me and the house. He said yes. David then told the jury everything. He described going to Mark's apartment. He described Mark's mood and demeanor. He quoted Mark's words about getting me to pay half the mortgage without giving me any legal claim. He described how Mark had laughed and called me foolish. He explained how Mark had said it was my own fault for being too trusting. The courtroom was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The jury was listening intently. I watched their faces, and I could see that David's testimony was hitting home. Mark's lawyer tried to discredit David on cross-examination. He suggested David was lying because he had some grudge against Mark. David calmly explained that he had no grudge. He said he simply could not stay silent when he knew his brother had done something wrong. The lawyer suggested David was biased in my favor. David said he barely knew me, but that right was right, and wrong was wrong. The lawyer tried to poke holes in his memory of the conversation. David did not waver. He said he remembered it clearly because it had bothered him so much. After David stepped down, Mark's lawyer called Mark to the stand. Mark tried to present himself as reasonable and honest. He admitted the house was in his name. He admitted I had made payments, but he stuck to his story that those were just contributions to living expenses. He denied ever promising me ownership. He said I had misunderstood. He tried to look sincere, but I think the jury could see through him, especially after David's testimony. Jennifer cross-examined Mark, and she was brilliant. She asked him why, if I was just contributing to expenses, the amount I paid matched exactly half of the mortgage every single month for years. He stumbled over that answer. She asked him why he had used language like our house and our future in messages if he considered it solely his property. He said it was just casual language, She asked him if he had told his brother that he had gotten me to pay half the mortgage without giving me a legal claim. He denied saying it. She asked him if he was calling his brother a liar. He hesitated and then said David must have misunderstood, but the damage was done. The jury had heard David's clear, detailed testimony, and Mark's denial sounded weak. The closing arguments were powerful. Jennifer summarized all the evidence. She reminded the jury of David's testimony and how it corroborated my account. She said, Mark had engaged in a calculated scheme to benefit from my money while ensuring I had no legal rights. She asked the jury to hold him accountable. Mark's lawyer argued that sympathy was not a basis for a legal judgment. He said the law was clear and that the house was Mark's. But his argument felt hollow after everything the jury had heard. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Those were the longest 2 days of my life. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I just waited. Jennifer tried to reassure me, but she also said juries were unpredictable. Finally, we got the call. The jury had reached a verdict. We rushed back to the courthouse. Everyone stood as the jury filed in. The foreperson handed a piece of paper to the judge. The judge read it silently and then asked the foreperson to read the verdict aloud. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The foreperson stood and read, "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Sarah." I gasped. Jennifer grabbed my hand and squeezed it. The foreperson continued reading. The jury awarded me damages equal to all the mortgage payments I had made, plus interest, plus additional compensation for emotional distress and fraud. The total amount was more than I had even hoped for. It was not quite half the value of the house, but it was substantial. It was justice. Mark's face went red. He looked like he was about to explode. His lawyer put a hand on his arm to calm him down. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. Then, the judge addressed Mark directly. The judge said that the jury had clearly found his conduct to be deceptive and unacceptable. The judge said the evidence had shown a pattern of manipulation and unjust enrichment. The judge ordered Mark to pay the damages within 30 days. After the judge left, I just sat there in shock. Jennifer hugged me. My parents, who had been in the courtroom, came over and hugged me too. I started crying, not from sadness this time, but from relief. It was over. I had won. Mark stormed out of the courtroom without looking at anyone. His lawyer followed him, looking defeated. David came over to me. I hugged him tightly and thanked him. I told him I could never repay him for what he had done. He said he did not want repayment. He said he just wanted to do the right thing. He said he was sorry his brother had hurt me. I told him he was nothing like his brother, and I meant it. David had shown me that integrity and courage still existed. In the days after the trial, the reality of the verdict sank in. Mark paid the damages. He had no choice. His lawyer advised him not to appeal because the evidence against him was strong, and an appeal would likely fail and cost him more money. I received a check that represented years of my hard work and contributions. It was not just about the money, though. It was about being validated. It was about a jury of regular people hearing my story and agreeing that what Mark did was wrong. I used the money wisely. First, I paid off my debts. Then I put a down payment on a small house of my own. This time, my name was on the deed. Only my name. I made sure of that. It was a modest house, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Truly mine. I could paint the walls any color I wanted. I could plant any flowers I liked, and no one could take it away from me. My emotional healing took longer than the legal process. For months after the trial, I had nightmares. I dreamed that Mark was taking my new house. I dreamed that the verdict was overturned. I woke up in cold sweats. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me work through my feelings. She helped me understand that what happened was not my fault. She helped me learn to trust again, slowly and carefully. David and I stayed in touch. We became real friends. We met for coffee every few weeks. We talked about life, work, and everything except Mark. David never reconciled with his brother. Mark refused to speak to him after the trial. David said he was okay with that. He said he would rather lose a relationship with a dishonest brother than live with the guilt of staying silent. I admired him for that. He had sacrificed a family relationship to stand up for what was right. About a year after the trial, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Mark was struggling. The legal fees and the damages he had to pay had hurt him financially. The house sale profit that he had planned to use for investments was gone. His reputation in the real estate community had taken a hit because word got around about the trial. Some people did not want to do business with someone who had been found guilty of fraud, even if it wasn't a civil case and not a criminal one. I did not feel happy about his struggles, but I did not feel sorry for him either. He had made his choices, and he was living with the consequences. As for me, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I threw myself into my teaching. My students became a source of joy and purpose. I started dating again, very cautiously. I made sure to protect myself legally and emotionally. I learned to ask hard questions and not just accept what people told me. I learned that trust should be earned, not given freely just because someone claims to care about you. I also became an advocate for others in similar situations. I started volunteering with a legal aid organization that helped people, especially women, who were in financial disputes with partners. I shared my story. I helped others understand their rights. I told them that even when things seemed hopeless, it was worth fighting for justice. I told them about David, about how sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Looking back now, I can see that what Mark did to me was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. But it also changed me in important ways. It made me stronger. It made me more careful. It taught me about resilience and the importance of standing up for myself. It also taught me that there are good people in the world, people like David, who will do the right thing even when it costs them something. I learned that betrayal is not just about the act itself. It is about the shattering of trust. It is about realizing that someone you loved saw you as a tool to be used rather than a person to be valued. That kind of betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that healing is possible. It takes time, support, and a willingness to forgive yourself for trusting someone who did not deserve it. The legal system is not perfect. It is slow, it is expensive, and it is stressful. But in my case, it worked. It gave me a platform to tell my story. It forced Mark to face the consequences of his actions. And it validated my experience. The jury believed me. They saw through Mark's lies. That validation was almost as important as the financial compensation. I think about the moment David decided to help me. It was not an easy decision for him. He knew it would destroy his relationship with his brother. He knew his family might judge him. But he did it anyway, because his conscience would not let him stay silent. That kind of moral courage is rare. It reminds me that even in the darkest situations, there can be light. There can be people who choose to do the right thing simply because it is right. If I could go back and change things, would I? Part of me wishes I had never met Mark. Part of me wishes I had been more careful and insisted on having my name on the deed from the start. But another part of me recognizes that this experience, as painful as it was, taught me lessons I would not have learned any other way. It taught me about the importance of protecting myself. It taught me about the value of people like David. And it taught me that I am stronger than I ever thought I was. The story of what happened to me is not just about a house or money. It is about power, manipulation, and the abuse of trust. It is about how someone can systematically deceive another person while making them believe they are loved and valued. It is about how our legal system, for all its flaws, can sometimes provide justice to those who have been wronged. And it is about how one person's decision to speak the truth can change everything. I hope that anyone who hears my story and finds themselves in a similar situation will know that they are not alone. There are resources available, there are people who will help, and there is hope. It might not feel like it in the darkest moments, but there is hope. You can fight back, you can rebuild, you can survive and even thrive after betrayal. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have settled or gone to trial? Have you ever faced a betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew about someone? I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this video resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories about resilience, justice, and the strength it takes to stand up for yourself. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, knowing that others have faced similar challenges and come out the other side can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story.